Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Tabletopped. It's your host, Nick, here, and boy, howdy, do I have a great member of our community on the pod today to talk about his career in TTRPGs and also some obsessions that he's had lately that I have been sharing as well. So we're going to be talking about all of that. Of course, I'm talking about Jason Campbell, but maybe you know as the main blogger at Shadomain, and also has had his hands in the pot in the Cypher system community for half a decade now. And most people should really, if they want to start, I think that they should go to Shadomain first, and then they should go check out some of your design work, like Six Gun Doomsday, which is something that's coming up very soon. Maybe we can talk about that a little bit, as well as some other things that you've developed, and I'm sure we're going to get to that too. So Jason, welcome onto the podcast, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Nick. Great podcast, so I'm happy to be here. I live in southern New Hampshire, and I've been playing. I started playing RPGs. I guess I'll out myself. 1981 with the Mulvey Red Book. So it's been a while, but the last 5 years or so, I've got deeper into it. In that now we write the Shadomain.com blog, which weekly articles and interviews and reviews and all that kind of stuff. And once in a while, we publish games, adventures, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's an incredible resource, especially if you're somebody who likes this podcast but is not a DM or a player yet, and you just want to put yourself in the soup a little bit more. Yeah. Shadomain is a great website to really get a huge kind of diverse perspective on, if you're kind of interested in being a GM someday. It has, a ton of interviews with people who that is their favorite thing to do. Yeah. And we'll help you get started there. If you're just looking for what is a good system that's not D&D or something that you're trying to get your group to move to, or just want to try something new, Shadomain also has a ton of stuff for you there as well.
I should say that our interviews are all text-based, and we interview everybody from absolute beginners to, notables in the industry. So, because we want to hear everybody, we don't, we're not looking for clicks. So, and it's really easy if anybody out there wants to do it. We email you questions, you send us back answers whenever you have time, and then we just publish it as a text article. So.
Yeah, and especially right now, I feel like more and more TTRPG, the industry landscape is really defined by who has the most amount of marketing dollars. So because whatever can crack through public consciousness, and also it has the D&D juggernaut to kind of contend with as well. So a resource like your website is just amazing to really get sort of the pulse of the actual hobbyists that are in the community. So I do recommend everyone go check Jason's work out. But I brought you on today, and one of the things we were talking about off mic was that you were super interested in the idea of players contributing more to story, whether that be in the system itself. You actually brought up a couple of things like kids on bikes and stuff that kind of lean that way anyway. But I think we also were I would love to kind of hear your thoughts on more, crunchy systems as well that maybe lean a little bit away from a narrative based gameplay. So what has kind of got your goat? Why are you thinking about this so much lately?
I think it's been more or less a constant evolution for me. So part of it is just how long I've been doing this. In all through the 80s, we played AD&D first and second, and a lot of it. And we weren't, we drew pictures of our characters and such, but it wasn't as narrative as modern games are. We were there to win, basically. Get as many gold pieces and get the coolest, get the Vorpal sword. So I've been through all that, and we min-maxed our characters. And I think it's just, so I don't have anything against that kind of play. I think everybody should play however they want to. That's cool. But I've done that a lot. And in the last 5-10 years or so, I've looked at a lot of games that do things differently. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. Let me try that.
Yeah.
So a lot of the games we that I write and publish are sort of leaning that way, but I'm very clear when I run the games at cons and when I write it that this is not going to be for everybody. It doesn't mean you can't, match your paladin with your wizard spells to max out your character. If that's your thing, go for that. Yeah.
Yeah. When you're sort of, because you mentioned that kind of gameplay, and I've really kind of formed this sort of idea that the trajectory that a player has that gets them from at the beginning treating it more like a board game, which like you said is an incredible, very fun way to play. Everyone should play that way at least once, and like most people kind of start that way because you're learning the mechanics, and so it kind of becomes most of your brain power is just processing that. And then there's kind of an evolution that happens in there where you start knowing the core mechanics that you use the most often. And so you can kind of start letting your hands off the roller coaster a little bit. And then people start feeling a little bit better around making more narrative contributions to games. And I was wondering, when you sort of have been experiencing this in your evolution and what you are interested in nowadays, how important is player comfort in making those choices, kind of impacting what kind of games you play? Because that's what I find mostly is like there are people who have been playing for years and feel very comfortable, and they've played maybe so long that they're a little bit loose on the rules even, and that allows them to make some bigger swings, but they always feel very comfortable because they know the dynamics of a table. Whereas I've had a lot more trouble trying to get newer players to play in a more narrative or contributive way, because they're a little shy. They're a little gun shy on making a mistake. So what has your experience been around that?
Wow, it varies a lot. And I'm going to have stories. So I tend to use the metaphor that the way I used to run games and still play sometimes, we looked at it more like the dungeon master, the game master built an amusement park and the players were on for the ride.
Yeah.
You're not, it's not completely railroading. You still get to choose if you go on the tilt-a-whirl or the roller coaster, but the GM has built all the rides. And what I'm trying to do now is look at it more like we're all together building a jigsaw puzzle. And maybe I do the edge pieces, but it's all of our contributions together that make the picture. And that's, like I said, that's not for everybody. And I know we've had this discussion on your server before with some of your guys who are absolutely not in this camp.
Listen, I'm much more in that camp. Yeah.
Well, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just, I mean, some people come to the table expecting that, and that's what they want, right?
Yeah.
In certain cases, I've run games where there's an open question that's so open, like you walk into the room and Jim, you notice something strange on the bookshelf. What is it? Yeah. Maybe Jim's like, I don't know. You're the GM. You tell me what the hell it is. And I get that too, but Jason Cordova's games really bowled me over with this. I was like, wow, okay, because those are mystery games where even the GM doesn't know the answer, and I was like, you can do that? All right, it's really different, but that because I've kind of also settled into the case that the GM is a player too, right?
This is exactly what
responsibilities.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about this a lot.
Right. So a few times I've volunteered to run games or a series of games at a local game store. And if I go in there and all the players are old school min-maxers or something like that, just a different style than I'm used to running, that's okay. And like you said, I definitely want all my players to be comfortable all the time. But if you have a group that wants to play a different game than you want to run, you're allowed to have fun too, right? So, yeah. And
I really love what you said in there about GMs being allowed to play too, because I think that right now in general, the biggest idea is that when you're a DM, you're not playing the game, you're facilitating the game, you're running the game, you're whatever. It's like you're the monsters, we're the people. But I think the best games I've ever played in, either as a player or a GM, was games that we were all contributing to the story actively, so that the GM has that joy of discovery and the joy of finding stuff out in the game along with the players. Like that is something that can't be mitigated as like like I know that I've come off campaigns that we've played more in that style, and I'm like, I'm ready to jump immediately into another DM slot because it was just so fulfilling. It was so nice. It
Sure.
was so fun. And then I've also played in other games where like I'm like I have to design every week, and this is like a bit of a job. But the joy it brings my friends and being able to be there with them, that's worth it. And so I am always going to be in the barricades with you for the everybody kind of contributing to the world.
Yeah.
But like you said, it's really it's interesting that it's not talked about more of like, are you sort of allowing the DM to participate in the same way as a player?
Yeah. It's I mean, in every game, no matter what, the player does get to create, right? Like even in the most A1 module from the AD&D, you still don't know if the player is going to swing his axe or run for the treasure chest. There's always some variable for a GM, but it's a sliding scale, right? How much do you want? And probably the tipping point. Oh, now I just broke my metaphor. But probably the tipping point is when because I'm sure you have players who write like 10-page backstories, right? They've created a lot. But the
Yeah.
tipping point is when they get to influence something outside of their character, right?
Yeah.
So, and not every GM is going to be comfortable with it, but I don't want to know everything that's going to happen. I want to be surprised too.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that one of the biggest disappointments I see with new players as well, especially if they do write like a huge backstory, is when they hit the table and it's like, okay, let's start up the module or whatever it is, and the story isn't aligned with whatever that they have generated. And then I feel like that causes this sort of player character dissonance that kind of can hinder people's buy-in, I guess, to the adventure. But I think that you're able to avoid it more when, like you said, like, don't tell me everything, and also we're generating as we go in a certain sense. So your story is going to come up if you want it to.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So you asked me how do I do like my experiences with it. So I have a funny story, I think, from I guess it was PAX East last May. And Alexandria Type Library is there, and they are open. And besides being a library, you can pretty much run any game you want there. So I had signed up to run a game that I wrote last year called Hint. It's I can't say inspired by Clue, but it's a Brindlewood based style game where even I don't know what the who did it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but I had 8 players at the table, ranging from somebody who had been playing forever, a few 5e D&D players, and I had 2 players who had never played any RPG before. I tell them how the game's going to go, and I have a rule when I run these kind of games. I tell them in advance, if you're ever uncomfortable, if I ask you an open-ended question and you're uncomfortable with it, either because like I just don't do that, or I don't know, right at this minute, I'm not particularly creative, right? Yeah. You're allowed to say, I don't know. And then I improv and I'll make it up.
Yeah.
So of this couple who had never played before, I turned to the guy and he's like, and I forget, I asked him like the bookcase question, something similar to that. And he's like, well, I'm not sure. And I said, okay, well, it's this and this. And the next time that came up, I asked the other person who had never played before, and she just went on and on and on. Like for the whole session she was in. And by the end of the session, I think it was 3 hours, the other guy had kind of got the flow of it and was a little better. But it's interesting, right? Because they both had the same. It's not like she was an improv comedian. They had the same life experiences. It's just you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, I really love that you gave that out too. I think that is a GM technique that people don't utilize enough, where it's just the caveat of like, I'm going to try to get you guys involved in as much of this as possible. But if you ever feel like, hey, like this is not, like you said, it could even be like, I've had the worst day in the entire world and I'm just really not here for that tonight. Like, That's great. Like saying that and letting the DM know in a way that doesn't hinder gameplay, because I think that the worst thing I sort of have been an evangelist for tempo in games, and nothing makes me just cringe on the inside more than when you ask something of a character and it turns into like a 20-minute like, oh, well, is it sort of like this, or how are you feeling here? Like, here's some prompts that might inspire you. So
yeah, I have players like that even at my regular tables that are, well, I mean, my weekly game, I have only 4 players and they're completely across the board different from with each other.
Yeah.
That's
when you are playing in a like a Brindlewood Bay system, like you were saying, which we should just kind of clarify for the audience who might not be super familiar. Like you said, Jason, it's a game where like basically it is pretty much zero prep other than like reading the rules and like getting a sense for yourselves, because you're making everything at the table together at the time.
Yeah, you can prep, but not in the same way we think of prep for most games.
Yeah.
So Brindlewood Bay and Jason wrote a few others with this system, which is it's funny now. It's an open license and you can write on it. It's called Carved from Brindlewood. I'm like, okay.
Nice.
But the whole premise of the system is like you might have a location either mapped out or in your mind, but then you just have a list of clues, and it's always a mystery game. And along the way, they're going to find clues, but you haven't written the clues to lead them in a particular way. So some of the clues are completely random. A rubber duck, a piece of an old chandelier that doesn't match the room, just anything. And their job is to collect some number, usually 6 or 7, and then create some wacky theory about doesn't have to be wacky, maybe it'll make sense, but a theory about the crime, who did it, how it happened. And the more clues they can put into their story as a group, the higher chance of success. But then they roll dice. So no matter how good your story is, it could fail.
So, and it's a great system too, because it allows you to still have the dice tell stories aspect that everybody loves of TTRPGs with something that is a lot more free from constraints. I would say is the rule system allows players to make a lot of really big swings without a whole lot of penalties. It's sort of designed to facilitate that kind of thing.
The one thing is I would say about that is it can be hard for new game masters because the game master needs to be able to improv. In fact, that's almost the only thing the game master needs to be able to do. But it doesn't mean you should stay away from it. In fact, it's a great way to get better at improv, because the thing about these systems is you can't make a mistake. It doesn't matter what you've thrown into the game that, I don't know, the players like or don't like. It doesn't matter what you do. You can't really mess up.
Yeah. Yeah. And because there are other games that aren't strictly this system that kind of do things in a similar way, like 10 Candles and some other ones.
I was going to say generative. 10 Candles, especially in the beginning. That's the way Kids on Bikes is too.
Yeah.
You define your relationship with the person to your right and then the person to your left. And that, I've had great games of those, and especially at cons where nobody knows each other. It's really fun.
Well, this is the thing that I was going to ask you about and get your thoughts on, because I think maybe one of the most terrifying things in TTRPGs is going into a session that you feel super unprepared for as a GM. Like, it's just scary, even if it's not, it's not like, you're about to go do stand up or something. It's still very fun and you have a great time with your friends, but it's not great going in there with that kind of anxiety. How do you sort of either deal with that or learn to use that as a positive force with systems like these, where it kind of forces you into that situation, because you can't really write a whole module for them to run through? It's much less like I'm building all of the rides in the theme park. It's more like I'm telling you that the theme park exists and like what's inside.
Yeah, that happens all the time too. So when we're saying I don't want to gatekeep and say you can't do prep.
Sure, yes.
In these games, you could write a novel. You could write Temple of Elemental Evil if you wanted. The danger is you probably won't use most of it. And there's a chance you'll use only 5% of it. So, but if you just like writing and you have more time than I have, go for it if that's fun. But that's what, in games like D&D and Cypher and stuff, I generally use the Sly Flourish 8 steps method to prep. So I'm trying to only prep one session, maybe two ahead. I don't write a full campaign. But I always tell people, if you like writing, go for it. Do whatever you want. It's just trying to, when we say don't over prep, we're not saying get the hell out of here, you suck, because you wrote too much. It's more about,
not at all.
It's more about if you've got a limited time, maximizing that, being as efficient as you can with your prep.
I also feel like, especially for generated games like this, it's, for me, I'm like trying to save you the heartbreak of coming in with your amazing, well thought out, like 3-hour session that involves you all going to, the Disney World equivalent. And then someone like gets up and goes, and the first thing we do is we're in an airport and we're getting on a plane to Japan. And you're like, shit, everything's gone. So that's more so what I'm trying to save people from. Like you said, it's amazing if you want to prep, and if it does sort of soothe that anxiety, I think that it's worth it, because it lets you be a little bit more free and you'll have a better time. But it is heartbreaking.
Yeah, I think the big lesson is what I had said before. I think that you can't be wrong. You're not going to screw this up. You could prep a certain amount, like in a game that's mystery based, like Brindlewood Bay or The Between. If you have a list of 25 clues, even though those clues are going to be a sentence or less, that will help. So you don't have to make up everything. You might want to have an idea of, if it takes place in a house, like, is there woods behind the house? Just that kind of thing. So you could prep that, but you're going to have the pieces maybe, but you're going to have to glue them together. You're the glue.
Yeah. And in that way, I think that the way that I would suggest prepping for something like this, if you feel compelled to, is to prep things that allow you to not have to make as many decisions in the game, because you're just going to have to do a ton of them anyway, and anything to reduce that decision fatigue. And so what I'm talking about is like having a list of names that you can just sort of grab one if someone asks for what an NPC's name that you hadn't really thought about, or have a list of, problems that can arise if you're worried about being able to improvise unique things. And you don't even have to prep all of them yourself necessarily, because there are so many great resources that kind of provide a lot of these tables and lists too. So
I mean, the list of names I do in every game I run now. It's funny, because most of my life I was like, I am so good at coming up with names, I don't need to do that. And after a while it was like, yeah, but why am I exhausting myself? Let me just do it ahead of time.
For me, it's just like every time they ask for a name, I'm like just getting done a thing where it's like, and the bartender leans over and growls at you, there's somebody waiting for you in the back. And then they're like, what's this guy's name? And I'm like, Brian Appleseed. And they're like, that's a stupid name. So having stuff kind of pre-prepared so you don't have to feel that pressure is great too.
Yeah, I mean, the last long D&D campaign, people tell this story as if it's a joke. It actually happened, though. We ran from 1st to 20th. It was like 3.5 years. And I think the one NPC they remember more than anybody else is Cobby the Kobold, who I just needed a name and I didn't have one. And all the NPCs, I mean, they remember the ones that you put a lot of effort in, the big bad, but I don't know. You just got to go. Sometimes. I mean, if you think about it, you're making it up. It's going to be just as good if you make it up on the spot. It's no better because you made it up yesterday or 6 weeks ago, right? You're making it all up anyway. So
and also for folks who are interested in this sort of idea of zero prep, another way to do it in these systems, which I think is great, is that you can also be like, oh, you actually recognize this person. What is their name? And like, how do you know them? And then they can kind of tell, whatever they're going to say, and that will also help with that. So anytime you feel a little creatively backed up, you can sort of offload onto your players a little bit. And they feel great because it just puts them deeper into the world. But let's talk a little bit about creating a really functional story with this and like tips and tricks, because I've played in games that are like this. And like when we did our Haunt review, which is also sort of a collaborative storytelling game first and a TTRPG maybe second mechanically,
Mm-hmm.
that game felt like it was all of us learning how to tell a story together for a session, and it was like 3 hours, and by the end of it we sort of had an idea. How can you, is there any sort of tips and tricks you've picked up over the years where you can sort of maybe speed that process along? So like just habits that you can either encourage your players to do, or things that you as a player can do to really help the group sort of gel in this kind of system?
Yeah. So there's general and specific. Generally speaking, I'm letting the players lead me, even though they have no idea that's what's actually happening.
Yeah.
That's why I come, even though I know they need 6 to 7 clues, I come with a list of 25, because which clue, I know they're going to get a clue in the next scene if they do something cool, but I don't know what
Right.
that clue is going to be. So, like, I've run the same scenario of some of these games a half dozen times or more, and it's different every time. So sometimes if I can feel the players leaning into, like, oh, there's time travel here, or there's ghosts, or
Yeah.
I think they're the bad guy or something like that, then I won't solve the mystery for them, but I'll give them clues that help. So if they seem to be obsessed with this has to do with time travel, then I'll pull the grandfather clock out of my clues list rather than the VW bug. But that's the general perspective. From a specific, like what kind of hints in game. So I think one of the problems you might be thinking about is when the game stalls. And that can happen either if you've got 6 players who don't know each other at all, and they're all kind of hesitant about taking over or even suggesting something, or it's just the way the dice rolled and they happen to be in a boring room in a boring house. So this is advice that you could take in any game, not these zero prep, particularly narrative games, is as a GM, try to have the story, the environment act on the characters. Don't wait for them to do something. And that can be either a pacing problem or the players are just stumped, right? Because sometimes the players will get stumped in your D&D game and you'll be like, I already told them that the king is doing this. Why doesn't he? Well, you know what? If they're sitting there in the tavern, have the king get thrown through the front window and land on the floor next to them.
Yeah.
Have the environment act on you. And that helps. That can help with pacing too. That if they're walking around and not catching any of your plot threads or finding any clues, have somebody run into the room. Right, we'll pull this out of story writing. Have somebody run into the room with a loaded gun and see what happens.
Yeah, I do. I really do like the idea of a GM's primary responsibility to be a curator of interesting situations, kind of regardless of the way you're playing. And so I think that that's a really good rule of like having the environment act upon them. I've been in so many games that aren't even requiring players to really have a builder sort of attitude towards the environment. And you still get that sometimes of just like, you guys are in the library. I told you there's a big spell book on the table. Don't you want to open it? And they're just like, I don't know what we're supposed to do. So like, yeah, it's definitely sometimes people need a nudge, even if they're super storied and like, veterans of these kind of games. Sometimes it's just like it hits your brain a different way,
And the thing that I've learned lately is about giving people open questions, is rather than like the example I gave, oh, there's something weird on the bookshelf, try to steer it towards their character, even if they've only given you a sentence or two, right? Sometimes, even if they've given you absolutely nothing, you can help them. I had a game where I said, oh, there's a book on the shelf that you remember your grandfather gave you as a kid before he died. They didn't tell me they had a grandfather, right? I just made it up. But if they have no backstory, they're probably going to lean into that. And then you'll be like, tell me what book it is. So now it's not just, do my job for me, set the scene. It's more, there's something that your character that will relate your character to the environment, the scene, the story.
Yeah. Yeah, there's something that kind of has been in my brain for a while, and we did an episode a long time ago on it that we always joked about, called the ephemeral nature of memory, and how it's hard to have a player keep the memory of the events in the games for more than 2 weeks, and that might mean that it's like between a session, these sort of very notable things you need them to hold on to can get erased. So when we're talking about this sort of game, what are your thoughts on sort of longer term campaigns? Like maybe you want to run a Kids on Bike campaign, but maybe it's 6 sessions, or maybe it's, a full year if that's what you wanted to do. How would you recommend people like either tips and tricks, note taking, whatever it is that keeps them able to track a story that they are generating at the same time? You know what I mean?
All right. I can give tips, but I have to first fess up and say I've never successfully run a long version of any of these games. I think the longest I've run would have been Blades in the Dark, and even that didn't go 6 months.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I do with my other group that are now playing Cypher and used to play D&D, we have a shared Google Doc. So it's not on any one person to take notes. Everybody can contribute. And you will end up with people who never touch it and other people who do most of the work. But it does help, especially as you go along. Like you'll learn, oh, wait, if I title this episode, it'll be easier to find this later and that kind of thing. But it does a lot of that for you, because now it's a searchable document that anybody could use. Also, if one person misses a session, they can read, so you don't have to spend the first 20 minutes describing what happened last week.
I always find, because I've only run something like this, and it was in Monster of the Week, so a little bit, and not a crunchy system, but a little bit more crunchy than some of the ones we're talking about. And I think that the only reason I was able to sustain that for a year was because it is built with a laser focus on the Monster of the Week genre. And so you can just have these Monster of the Week things that are small arcs, or they're, it's every time a monster changes, then it's like, oh, this is a new part of the story we're entering into. It's like very, very
So
it helps
let me
you with
ask
that.
you a question about that.
Sure,
so
yeah.
Monster of the Week it's inspired by lots of things, but let's take X-Files, right? Because if you were a fan of the X-Files, there were Monster of the Week style episodes, and there was also the long arc episodes, and it would vary. When you run that campaign, did you ever have anything like the long story, or was it pretty much 1 to 2 episode and that was it?
Yeah,
so monster.
Yeah, so this was one, I would say it was during the pandemic, so I just had more time and I could prep a little bit more. And so I did a little bit of that, of like, how do I want to think about this? Because I had this idea of like this huge kind of piece of an interdimensional monster that was buried in a mountain. And I was like, it'd be super cool if like that was causing a bunch of issues in this town. And so how I kind of functionally did it was kind of stealing from the X-Files, where you have this big mystery that went for a full season or whatever. And then you had all of the Monster of the Week episodes in between. That might be 2 episodes, but usually it was 1 to 3, and then you would move on. But all of those would progress the overall story. And so that's how I was thinking about it. But the thing that requires you to do is that the players need to be addressing smaller threats than this big thing that's happening in the background. And it has to just be happening in the background for a while.
That makes sense. I like that. Yeah. That way you still get the feel of this monster this week, this monster next week. And it only in retrospect do they see that this is all part of a bigger story.
Exactly. Yeah. And repetition was huge because of the sort of thing of like, what are people going to hold on to? So I kind of created some totems, like there are these black marbles that they would find kind of that would fall out of each monster. And then I would have sort of at the beginning of arcs, there would be sort of a cutaway to something that was happening maybe miles away, but it would like they would see a hand grab a black marble or something, and so they'd be like, oh, this is important in some way, so I should track it. But it didn't force them to have to confront something every episode. It was just sort of happening in the background, like I said.
And I always say my players drive my games, even in 5e, a lot more than they know. They don't understand how much that like I throw stuff at them, and I don't know what's going to happen. So that's why I don't plan more than a couple of weeks ahead, because they've told me they don't want a long dungeon delve, because I've offered them a few times and they'd rather go do that. You know, they'll tell you if they're interested in a political game by just having it be one of the options. They hear a rumor, blah, 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 and they just ignore it. Well, okay, then don't do that so much. Right. So,
I think that is a really great piece of advice that GMs, I think, really recoil against, which is just drop the hooks that people are interested in. And like, maybe they were part of your huge story, but like, find a different way to like get that piece of the story in, because they just don't care about it. I also would never encourage, I mean, again, like you said, people can play however they want. People love running modules, which is a whole adventure written out for you. So it's obviously very fun and a lot of people like it. But if you are doing a homebrew story, I would really recommend, like you said, only writing an adventure ahead of where you are. Or even just like, you have to finish your adventure before you start writing the next part of it, because people are going to make some choices that are going to catch you off guard. Like in that game, Franco, one of the co-hosts, he really loved the idea that his character was a Cheers blogger in the 90s. And so it became so important because he would keep bringing it back during our sort of downtime episodes. And at the end, I wrote a whole adventure that was in this character's mind, and it was the Cheers bar, and she was figuring stuff out in there. And like, I wouldn't have been able to pay off his sort of like devotion to this bit if I hadn't to do that. You know what I mean?
In that the 5e campaign that I said we just ran from like 1st to 20th, so I didn't have any idea what was happening more than one extra session until they got to be at least 7th level. And there were a few longer arcs, like, oh, this necromancer is operating. So that's like 6 or 8 episodes. But what ended up being the big bad and the final thing that they had to get to 20th before they could even touch this guy. And he was, mechanizing in the back and such.
Yeah.
I don't think I actually had that idea. They were certainly 10th. They were probably 12th or 13th because by then, like you're saying, they had basically told me what they were interested in by choosing paths. So I developed that for them, but I don't know if they actually realized that. So by that point, I'm saying I haven't planned. By that point, so by the time they were 15th, I basically knew how 20th was going to end, but in very short bullet points. I know I'm pointing like you guys can see me. In very short bullet points, not in, like I hadn't written 10 pages for each, session.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is the thing too, is like right now I'm running a D&D campaign after I swore I never would again. just jokes, but kind of true in that like it's just not a system that I'm super comfortable GMing with in comparison to other things.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to do it in this very like open-ended, I'm not planning an end destination sort of way. And the only thing I would say is that sometimes I have trouble clocking where people are interested, because I give out all of these hooks and they all have clocks on them. And they're just like kind of focusing on the clocks more than the story hooks that they represent, if that makes sense. So they're like, oh, we only have a week before we have to do that, so let's focus on that first. And then, oh, that thing over there only has like 3 days left, so obviously we need to do that before the other thing. And so I may have shot myself in the foot by doing it that way. But do you have any sort of like hints, tips, or tricks about how to identify threads maybe earlier on. They're level 5 right now, if that helps.
Yeah. I mean, it's always going to be hard when you start a campaign, especially if you don't know the players very well. Because if it's your buddies, you know that they're looking for, that they need a fight every session, right? But assuming you don't know that, it's hard. One thing that I absolutely swear to at this point is that 3 is the magic number. That I try to give, because I've screwed it up in both directions, other ways. That if you have 1, obviously you're railroading. If you only have 1 possible plot thread, if you have 2, now you've given them a choice, but they feel like, well, we want to do this because the GM. We'll do this because the GM wants us to. 3 makes them feel like 3 things, like, oh, the king just imprisoned the banker's the tavern owner's son or something like that, and you heard there's a dragon out in this cave, and so 3 different kinds of threads, right? But I've gotten in trouble in the other way. If I have more than 3, my players will definitely have choice paralysis, and they won't know what to do, and you'll get that, I don't know what we're supposed to do, and you're thinking, you're not supposed to do anything, just
do whatever you want to do. And this is actually, I want to kind of bring it back to the systems we were talking about before that are a little bit more like group generative. Like, how do you, because like you said, when there's even if it's like 2 things, they're like, okay, we have a choice. We're not being railroaded, but like the GM wants us to move in a certain direction. 3 choices feels good. It feels like, oh, this is like an infinite amount of branches off of these 3. This feels like we can do anything while still having a contained shape. But also I have gotten from players before when I sort of am like, anything can happen, like in these games, let's like, and say to a player, like, what is happening right now? I've sort of also gotten in the end them feeling like, oh, the story wasn't as impactful because it was just made up on the spot. And I was sort of like, I don't have any trouble with that because I'm like an improv person and like I like that stuff and I value it. But there are people who are just like, I just feel like it wasn't meaningful because it wasn't some epic fantasy or something. What do you think about that? Have you experienced that? And are there any things you can do to sort of, also give the illusion that there was always a right answer and you guys found it. You found it because you're so smart,
Yeah. So I think this is one where I'm not going to have any practical advice. There are players like that, and I haven't found many of them, but I've heard of them and seen them. And well, for one thing, if I knew there was a player like that, I wouldn't ask them to play Brindlewood Bay or the Queen or like, Fate Monster of the Week would still probably work. But nothing where you're asking them to actually help build the world. But what I don't understand, and you're kind of touching on this, is because of what I had said earlier, like, I'm always making stuff up, right?
Yeah.
So why do you get really mad if you ask me a question and I make up the answer? But if I had written down the answer an hour ago, you'd be fine with it. It's the same answer. But I don't really understand that whole mentality. But that really doesn't help, right? The question is, what do you do when you encounter that? What you probably want, assuming you know roughly where they're going or one of 2 spots, do like a bullet point outline. So you have something written down, even if you're going to use improv to build off of that. So you don't have to write like the old modules. Well, actually, even the new modules too. Box text and what's in the closet of the room and stuff like that. But so it's sort of a compromise, I guess, and hopefully that works. That the player understands that you've written something that they can. You've designed the roller coaster that they can ride in. Yeah, even if you didn't write every strat of that roller coaster.
Yeah. I think it comes from a place of like, I want to do the right thing. I kind of want to prove that I can get out of the horror movie because I make all the right choices. When in actuality, it's like we're all making these choices randomly, and I'm kind of not arbitrarily. We have mechanisms like dice and all that kind of thing, but we are kind of deciding how this goes, as there is no right answer, you know?
Yeah, that's absolutely fair. If you're my age and you read Encyclopedia Brown, you don't want to make up the answer. You want to know you got the right one. If you want to know you got the question on Jeopardy right. So this happened in a game I ran just the other day. I had written this. It's not really Brindlewood Bay, but it's that general system.
Yeah.
And it's a horror scenario where 5 people that don't know each other end up kind of figuring out in this weird place, and they have to figure out what's going on. So at one point, there's a room of glass and mirrors, and I had written down a picture of a panther, like in the glass mirror. The panther jumps out at you.
Yeah.
And they had each made up their own characters, and this guy who looked right into the mirror, he had made up a character that was like one of these like psychic investigators, like the investigators you see on YouTube that have their own channel and stuff. So he looks at it and he goes, and I said, well, the panther jumps out at you. What do you want to do? And he could basically, I said, well, if you want to avoid it, it's probably like a dexterity kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Or maybe you could try to catch him and throw him, and then that would be more like strength. But then he says, well, can I use intellect? And I was like, well, now I said, wait a minute, your character's a psychic investigator, right? I said, if you think your character would do it, you can disbelieve it. You can think it's an illusion. And if you roll high enough, then you'll figure out. But what I did was, I had no idea because I had only written panther jumps on the guy.
Yeah.
So I was like, if he rolls high enough, then it was an illusion. Yeah. If he rolls low enough, he gets hit by an actual panther. But I knew these players. There are certain players that would just out and out murder me for that. It just doesn't make sense. That the role is supposed to determine like how you work with the environment. It's not supposed to change the environment. Yeah,
but it can though, and like that's the thing that I
really
think is
if you're up for
that. And it's all about whether you are enjoying that direction too as the person like facilitating the game. And then I think that part of this is like why the DM screen was sort of invented, was that you can do all your hocus pocus behind the scenes, and everyone's like, wow, the magician at work, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and it feels a little bit like
I do wonder
that,
and I don't think there's any way that I could get a real answer. My regular players, can they tell now when I'm making stuff up or when I have it written down? Because my regular group is online, so they can't literally see. But I wonder how much, like, it's been 5 years, they can probably read my voice now. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe they don't care.
Yeah, that could definitely be it too. But the way that I've always sort of sneakily got how much of it that they thought is real or not, or whatever it is if you ask like at the end of a campaign, like, oh, do you guys have any questions? And then they're like, oh, was it always that monster? Like, what do you mean?
I do
like, that kind of stuff, because I think that also kind of lets you know, like, if they were like, oh, everything was you're a master at work, or if they were like, wow, we made a cool thing together.
I am. A lot of people will tell you, and I actually agree with it, I just don't do it myself. It's not a good idea to pull back the curtain.
Yeah.
That it's more fun for the players if they don't know. If you go, I don't know, what do you think? But I always think of my job as a GM, like a secondary job, is kind of showing some of the players who have never GM'd before how to do it. So I always say, ask them if they have any questions, and I'll tell them how I did everything.
And it's like that. It's the little bad treat that you get right at the end of the campaign, because like you said, you shouldn't show the players sort of the mechanism, because then it loses a little bit of the immersion or the believability or whatever it is. But I think that GMs do a lot of hard work, and at the end, like, why not treat yourself to a little bit of what they thought about everything? I
fall to that temptation all the time.
Yeah, same. Jason, it's been great talking to you. We're going to have you on in the new year because I want to talk about how to teach kids how to play TTRPGs, which you have some experience about. So audience, you'll be hearing from Jason again soon. But Jason, before we kind of end the episode, I want to hear a little bit about what you're working on. I want to hear a little bit about Six Gun Doomsday, and where can people find you, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, it's easy to find me because I said our website is shadomain.com, but I am Shadomain on every social media. So even Discord. That's the benefit of making up a word. Nobody has it.
Yeah. Easy branding.
Yeah. So you can find me there. And then if you want to email us, it's shadowmainrpg@gmail.com. So what we're working on right now, we had a Kickstarter over the summer. Oh, shoot, I said it now. I had a backer kit campaign over the summer for a book that we're releasing realistically this spring. We'll be done with it. I know, surprisingly, it wasn't finished before I did it. I actually needed the money to pay editors and such. So this is it's based on Cypher system, but from Money Cook Games, but it does have its own a lot of alternate rules, alternate character creation. It's a setting and more so an adventure, and it combines Weird West with Gothic horror and post-apocalypse.
If people are interested in you said that the backer kit was over the summer, but people are really interested in this project and want to kind of see more about it or want to support it in some way, is there a way for them to do that, or a way for them to track so that they can pick it up once it's out?
You didn't miss out if you missed the backer kit campaign. It'll still be out there. I'm not sure where you'll be able to find it. You'll at least be able to buy it at our site, drive through, that kind of thing. But the smaller project we did last spring, I guess it was only Hint, that clue-based thing, is now available at Indie Press Revolution. So if you're
hell yeah. I love those guys. They're great.
I don't know if I'll get Six Gun there because this is going to be a lot bigger book. So we'll see.
Jason, thank you so much for coming on. Everybody should go right now and bookmark shadowmain.com. That's SHADO, no W, and then MAIN.com, just to make sure everyone gets that. And
I was 14. I thought it was clever combining Shadowmain and Shadow and Domain.
It always reminded me of the Shadowfell and the Penny Arcade sort of like, that name's awesome because it's Shadow and then it fell. But we'll see you all here in your feeds in a couple of weeks with another episode. If you want to support Tabletopped or suggest a topic, go to tabletopppod.com. We have a contact form for you there, as well as a link to our Discord where you can get involved with the community. All right, everyone, we will see you in a few weeks. Goodbye.